Throughout his life, he was consumed by a single, unrelenting passion, hunting. From dawn till dusk, day after day, he pursued it with a kind of mad ecstasy. In winter and summer, spring and autumn, he roamed the marshes, even when hunting in the woods and fields was forbidden. With a rifle, with greyhounds, with pointers and hounds, at mating grounds, with decoys and traps, he knew neither fatigue nor doubt. He spoke only of hunting, dreamed of it at night, and never tired of repeating. Truly wretched is the man who does not love the hunt. Now he had turned 50, yet remained vigorous and lively. Though balding and slightly stout, he was still strong. He shaved the lower part of his mustache so that his lips and mouth were fully exposed. It made it easier to blow his hunting horn. In his hometown, he was simply known as Monsieur Hector. His full name was Baron Hector Gontran de Couteleu. He lived in the forest, in a modest house inherited from his family. Though acquainted with all the local nobility and often met their male representatives on communal hunts, he most frequently visited the household of the Decauville family, kind neighbors whose ties to his lineage stretched back generations. There, he was pampered, cherished, indulged, and he often said, "If I weren't a hunter, I'd never leave your side." Monsieur de Corville had been his childhood friend. A gentleman farmer, Corville lived peacefully with his wife, daughter, and son-in-law Darnatot, supposedly engaged in historical research, though in truth he did very little. Baron de Couteleu often dined with them, mainly for the pleasure of recounting his hunting exploits. His trove of stories about dogs and ferrets was inexhaustible. He spoke of them as if they were distinguished personalities, intimately known to him. He read their thoughts, interpreted their desires, explained their actions. When Medda realized the corncrake was leading him on a wild chase, he thought, "Just wait, my friend, we'll have some fun now." He nodded to me to take position at the corner of the clover field, then angled across, rustling the grass to drive the bird into a trap. Everything unfolded just as he'd planned. The corncrake found itself at the edge. There was nowhere left to hide. Caught, damn it, it thought, and froze. Medda stood on point, staring at me. I gave the signal. He lunged. Brrrr, the corncrake took flight. I aimed, bang, and down it went. Medda brought me the prize, wagging his tail as if to say, "Well done, Monsieur Hector, wasn't that perfect?" Corville, Darnatot, and the ladies laughed until they cried at these vivid tales, into which the Baron poured his whole soul. He grew animated, gestured wildly, moved with his entire body, and when he reached the climax, he burst into laughter and always concluded, "Not bad, wouldn't you agree?" Whenever the conversation shifted to another topic, he withdrew, fell silent, and began softly imitating hunting calls. And when a lull came, that sudden hush after lively chatter, the room would fill with the sound of a hunting signal. Ton, ton, ton 10, ton, ton. The Baron, cheeks puffed as if blowing into a horn, would perform his roulades. He had devoted his entire life to hunting and had grown old without even noticing. But a sudden bout of rheumatism confined him to bed for 2 months. He nearly died of boredom and despair. His meals were prepared by an aging servant, and with no female staff, he lacked warm compresses, small comforts, and the care so vital to the sick. His kennel master became his nurse, just as bored as the Baron, and slept day and night in a chair by the bed. Meanwhile, the Baron lay under his blanket, cursing and fuming with impatience. The ladies of the Decauville household visited him from time to time. Those hours were his moments of peace. They prepared his drinks, tended the fire, served breakfast while sitting at the edge of his bed. And when they rose to leave, he would exclaim, "Damn it! You ought to move in here." They laughed with all their hearts. Once recovered, he returned to the marshes and one day came to dine with his friends. But he was no longer the same, the old spark and cheer were gone. A single thought tormented him. What if the illness returned just before the hunting season opened? As he took his leave, and the ladies wrapped him in a shawl and tied a cravat around his neck, a concession he had never made before, he grumbled with a note of despair. "If this happens again, I'm a ruined man." When he left, Madame de Darnetot turned to her mother and said, "It's high time the Baron got married." Everyone threw up their hands. How had no one thought of it before? From that moment on, their evenings were devoted to searching for a suitable bride among the widows they knew. Eventually, they settled on one woman, Bertha Villa, around 40, still attractive, cheerful, healthy, and quite well off. She was invited to spend a month at the chateau. Bored and curious, she accepted. Bertha turned out to be lively and witty, and Baron Coutelieu immediately took a liking to her. She played with him like a living doll, spending hours in conversation, slyly asking about the feelings of rabbits and the cunning of foxes. The Baron spoke with passion about animal behavior, attributing to them intentions and reflections as if they were people he knew intimately. Her attention thrilled him. And one evening, eager to show his esteem, he invited her to join him on a hunt, an honor no woman had ever received before. The invitation amused her, and she accepted. Preparing for the hunt became a festive affair for the whole household. Everyone offered their help, and Bertha emerged dressed like an Amazon. Boots, men's trousers under a short skirt, a velvet, tightly fitted jacket, and a rider's cap. The Baron was visibly nervous, as if about to fire his first shot. He explained in detail how to read the wind, recognize a dog's stance, and aim at game. In the field, he followed her closely, with the care of a nanny guarding a child's first steps. Medda caught a scent, crept forward, froze, and raised a paw. The Baron, standing behind his pupil, trembled like a leaf. "Careful, careful," he whispered. "Pa, pa, oh partridges." He hadn't finished the word when a flurry of wings erupted, birra, 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 and a whole flock of plump birds burst into the air. Madame Villa, startled, shut her eyes and fired both barrels. The gun kicked, and she stepped back. But quickly regaining composure, she looked at the Baron, who was leaping with joy, while Medda, 2 partridges in his mouth, raced toward him. From that day on, Baron Coutelieu was in love. "What a woman," he would exclaim, rolling his eyes, and came every evening to talk about hunting. One day, as Monsieur de Corville was seeing him out and listening to his enthusiastic praise of the lady, he suddenly asked, "Why don't you marry her?" The Baron was taken aback. "Me? Marry? Her? Truly?" He fell silent, shook his friend's hand, and said, "Good night, my dear fellow," then strode off into the darkness. He didn't appear for 3 days. When he finally returned, he was pale and unusually serious. "You've given me a splendid idea," he said, pulling Corville aside. "Try to prepare her for my proposal. Damn it. That woman seems made for me. We'll hunt together all year round." "Make the proposal at once, my friend," Corville replied, certain she would accept. "Shall I take care of it for you?" The Baron suddenly grew flustered and mumbled, "No, no. First I'll take a short trip to Paris. Once I'm back, I'll give you my final answer." He offered no further explanation and left the next day. The trip dragged on. A week passed, then another, then a third, and still no sign of Coutelieu. The Corvilles, puzzled and concerned, didn't know what to tell Bertha, who had already been informed of the Baron's intentions. Every couple of days they sent a servant to inquire, but no one in his household knew anything. Finally, one evening, as Madame Villa played the piano and sang, a maid quietly informed Monsieur de Corville that a gentleman was asking for him. It was the Baron. He had changed noticeably, aged, and wore travel clothes. Upon seeing his old friend, he grabbed his hands and said in a weary voice, "I've just returned, my dear fellow, and came straight to you. I couldn't bear it any longer." After a pause, visibly embarrassed, he added, "I wanted to tell you, right away, that this, you know what I mean, will not happen." De Corville stared at him, bewildered. "What do you mean, won't happen? Why?" "Oh, please don't ask. It would be too difficult to explain. But know this, I'm acting as an honest man. I cannot. I have no right, do you hear? No right to marry that lady. I'll wait until she leaves, and then I'll come back to you. It would be too painful to see her now. Farewell." And he was gone. The whole family discussed, debated, and speculated. There were no fewer than 1,000 theories. They concluded that the Baron must be hiding some grave secret. Perhaps he had illegitimate children, or a long-standing, unresolved affair. The matter gradually took on a somber hue, and to avoid further complications, they had a discreet conversation with Madame Villa. She, maintaining her dignity, returned home just as she had arrived, a widow. 3 more months passed. One evening, after a hearty dinner and a few glasses of wine, Coutelieu lit his pipe and said to de Corville, "If only you knew how often I think about your friend, you'd pity me." Corville, still somewhat offended by the Baron's conduct, flared up. "Damn it, my dear fellow, if you carry secrets inside you, you shouldn't start serious business in the first place. Surely you could have foreseen what might hold you back." The Baron, visibly embarrassed, fell silent and set his pipe aside. "Yes and no. I didn't expect what happened." "You must anticipate everything," Corville replied impatiently. Coutelieu glanced around the dim corners of the room, as if checking that no one was eavesdropping, then lowered his voice and began. "I see I've offended you, and I want to explain everything. For 20 years now, my friend, I've lived for nothing but hunting. It's the only thing I care about, the only thing that occupies my thoughts. And when I decided to take on obligations toward this lady, doubts suddenly rose within me. Since I've grown unaccustomed to love, I honestly didn't know if I was still capable of, well, you understand. Think about it. It's been 16 years since the last time, you know what I mean. Around here, it's not so easy, you know that yourself. Besides, I had other concerns. I prefer shooting. So when I was preparing to stand before the mayor and the priest for, well, you know what, I was seized by fear. I said to myself, damn it. What if I misfire? An honest man must keep his promises, and I was about to take on sacred obligations toward this woman. To calm myself, I decided to spend a week in Paris. A week passed, and nothing. Absolutely nothing. And not for lack of trying. I chose the very best available. I assure you, they did everything they could. Yes, they tried their utmost. But what came of it? Nothing. Nothing at all. I waited another 2-3 weeks, still hoping. I ate spicy dishes in restaurants, ruined my stomach, and still nothing. Absolutely nothing. You understand, under such circumstances, with such clarity, I had no choice but to withdraw. And that's what I did. De Corville could barely contain his laughter. He shook the Baron's hand solemnly and said, "I'm sorry for you," and walked him halfway home. Left alone with his wife, he recounted the whole story with roaring laughter. But Madame de Corville didn't laugh. She listened attentively, and when her husband finished, she said with a serious expression. The Baron is simply foolish, dear. He's afraid, that's all. I'll write to Bertha right away and ask her to come back as soon as possible. When de Courville reminded her of their friend's long and fruitless efforts, she merely shrugged. Oh, nonsense. When a man loves his wife, it always comes. De Courville, slightly embarrassed, said nothing.